Well, hello there, sane thinking Europeans. Putin has made an offer to you. Yes, you, literally you. And you're probably thinking, well, not me, but it is in fact you that he's making the offer to. And the offer is basically come to Russia. Now, that might sound a little bit crazy, but I read an article recently on, I think it was on Business Insider, and basically the Russian Foreign Ministry, with the approval of Putin himself, has issued out this sort of decree that they want Western Europeans who reject neoliberal ways of thinking. So if you want to call it like the woke ideology, I'm not really interested in the semantics, whatever you want to call it, this sort of like, I guess what I would see as the sort of really far left student union politics that's kind of taken over our politics and our society today. If you want to reject that, then Putin is saying, well, you can do, just come to Russia. Now, that may be kind of surprising, and you may be thinking, well, he can't be talking about me, but I think he probably is talking about you. If you're a plumber or a carpenter or a mechanic or whatever your trade is, whatever skills or talents you have, maybe you're, I don't know, maybe you work in an office, whatever you do, I think Putin is appealing directly to you to come to Russia. Now, that might sound a little bit crazy, but I think the offer is serious. And I think the offer is serious for a couple of reasons. The first reason is, well, first of all of the requirements that usually you have to meet in order to come to Russia are things like a basic understanding of the Russian language, a basic understanding of Russian history. All of that's been waived under this new scheme. So I think it's a serious offer for that reason. You know, they really are trying to appeal to people who wouldn't have otherwise considered Russia. But the second reason, the most important reason that I'm fairly sure this is very serious, is Russia has a really big problem with its demographics, as do a lot of countries right now. It's got a declining birth rate. I don't think the birth rate is anywhere near the replacement rate of like 2.1 births per woman on average, whatever it is. And also people are emigrating from Russia. So you have this curious situation where the population of Russia is only 146 million. And I believe by 2046, I read this somewhere, that the population is going to decline to 136 million. Now, that only sounds like, well, it's 10 million fewer people. But it's quite a lot, right? 8%. And as that happens, and that keeps happening, in the next generation, there's fewer people to have children. So now you just end up in this endless cycle, unless you can get the birth rate above 2.1 again, you just end up in this endless cycle of population decline. And the only way to, I guess, maintain your country in those circumstances, realistically, is to, well, there's a few ways, right? You can incentivize people having children, which I think is the absolute best way that that should be done. You know, if you're in Russia, just incentivize more Russians to have children. One thing that's probably not incentivizing Russians to have children is the fact that there's a war ongoing, right? So a lot of young men are tied up in this war. If they're not tied up in the war, they're probably thinking, well, I might be tied up in the war in the future. A lot of young women are probably thinking, I don't want to have children with, you know, the knowledge that my husband, partner, whatever, is in a trench somewhere in Western Ukraine, or, sorry, Eastern Ukraine, hopefully not Western Ukraine. If so, you've got lost. That was some properly good officer navigational skills there to get the sides of the country completely wrong and then dig a trench there. So any soldiers who are watching this, fair enough. Anyway, I digress. But, you know, all of that, the war and everything else, the sanctions and whatever else, the sort of unstable political climate isn't going to incentivize people to want to have children. So the other way to increase the population realistically is through immigration. Now, I think it's not lost on me the irony of the fact that I have taken a very anti-mass migration sort of stance to my politics, and yet I'm here talking about the possibility of, you know, Western Europeans mass migrating to Russia. But hey, if Russia's asking for it and deliberately setting up special measures to encourage it, then I think that's a slightly different situation. I guess you would have to look at what ordinary Russians think about, you know, the French and the British and Americans and whatever moving to Russia. Maybe they're all for it, maybe they're against it. If they're against it, you probably shouldn't go. Simple as that. So, but you know, that's my personal politics. The point is, Putin has tapped into something here, I think, quite profoundly, that he recognizes that ordinary, sane, working Europeans don't buy into this sort of ultra-far left woke ideology. And actually, they are the people who are like the sort of blue-collar workers, if you like. They're the ones who have the skills and the talents that could be used and could be useful in Russia. So he's saying, he's putting out an open message and saying, hey, if you reject all of that and you want to live in a more conservative society, traditionally Russian Orthodox Christian society, come to Russia, be our guest. And that, to me, that was fascinating. Really, really, really fascinating. So I think the offer's serious for those two reasons. But just because it's a serious offer, does that mean you should really take them up on it? Well, look, before we had Brexit, a lot of Polish people came to work in the UK, right? And the reason I think that they were able to seamlessly and so easily do that is because English is kind of it's not a universal language, right? But it's kind of a language that most people in Europe know. Like when German is speaking to a Frenchman, they're probably going to speak in English because the German might not speak French and the Frenchman might not speak German. So they'll just speak in English. It's this kind of almost universal language. Maybe that's not quite the right way of putting it, but it's close enough. God, it's windy. Probably all the audio from this is going to be terrible, and this one take video is just going to have to go straight in the bin, but we'll try, we'll push through. But look, that doesn't exist with Russia, okay? So that sort of, that thing which made it very easy for a lot of Polish people who had some understanding of English to come to England does not exist with Russia. Only 5% of Russians speak English fluently, and only 63% say they have some awareness of the English language. And I don't really know exactly what that means. I mean, I've got some awareness of the Russian language. I can say da or niet, spasibo, spasibo bolshoi, like a couple of words here and there, but I don't speak Russian. And if a Russian started speaking to me in earnest, I would be up shit creek without a paddle. That's just the truth. So I think, you know, you would have to learn Russian if you wanted to move to Russia, which seems fair enough. The only problem with that is that for native English speakers, Russian is one of the hardest languages to learn. Really, really, it's not easy at all. In fact, I think it's the 4th or 5th hardest language after like Chinese, Japanese, Korean and Arabic or something like that. And it takes like 5 times longer to learn Russian than it would for you to learn French, say, if you wanted to learn French. Maybe I've got that, maybe I'm exaggerating even that slightly. Maybe it's not quite 5 times, but it's a lot longer. So if you thought, you know, GCSE French was boring and you didn't have the will to stick it through, a bit like me, then Russian might be even more to chew off, I would say. So that's like warning number 1. The other warning is obviously salaries. Salaries are really important, right? So the salaries in Russia are a lot lower. I think the average salary, I Googled it, is like $15,000. But I'd be willing to bet that the places that most Western Europeans would move to, places like Moscow and not like Siberia, for example, the salaries are a lot higher. I imagine it's probably like, you know, $25,000, $30,000 average salaries, something like that. And I watched a video recently, a really fascinating video about a Scottish guy who's, if I can find his channel, I'll put it in the description. If you're interested in Russia, you can watch his videos. But he was talking about his expenses in Russia. And his apartment expense in Moscow, so what you would expect to be one of the most expensive areas, Moscow and St. Petersburg, was something like $650, okay? And then his bills on top of that were like $50. So suddenly, now, if you're getting paid $25,000, $30,000 and your expenses are $700 for an apartment in Moscow, that doesn't sound too bad anymore. That actually sounds pretty reasonable. Like you could, in fact, you're probably better off than you would be in the UK. And then all of your other expenses like food and everything else gas, all of that stuff is going to be cheaper in Russia, especially like energy, gas and oil. Russia produces all of its own gas and oil. I mean, in fact, they've probably got a whole lot of it right now because of all the sanctions and everything else, meaning they can't sell it overseas, although they can, they just sell it to China and then China just sells it. Anyway, but that's not the point. The point is, I think you could probably get a better standard of living, and the cost of living, even in the most heavily sanctioned country in the world, is probably better if you go to Russia. Anyway, I'm here in Bruges. I'm not really in Bruges. This is a canal. I'm just outside Bruges, but I'm going to go into Bruges now. We'll take a look at Bruges, see what Bruges is like, and then, I don't know, maybe I'll say some more about Russia. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just end the video. Let's go and take a look at Bruges.
I didn't even know where Bruges fucking was. It's in Belgium.
Bruges is a shithole. Bruges is not a shithole.
Bruges is a shithole.
Ray, we've only just got off the fucking train. Could we reserve judgment on Bruges until we've seen the fucking place?
I know it's going to be a shithole.
Well, I just had some authentic American cuisine at McDonald's Bar and Grill. It's just McDonald's. It's pretty bad to come all the way to Belgium and then just have McDonald's. But look, it's cheap, predictable. Yeah, I don't know, I'm feeling lazy, so that's what I went for. I'm just sort of wandering around, you know, looking at all these different buildings, towers, just looking at all the amazing things that people in Belgium, people in Europe have managed to build over thousands of years, you know, well, hundreds of years, a couple of thousand years. It's just outstanding. I mean, Europe is honestly just the gem of the world. It's also quite quiet here in Bruges. It's a little bit busier, just in the central square where I was, but yeah, it's pretty quiet. Anyway, to round off this topic about Russia, before I get too distracted, will I be going to Russia? No, I will not. My skills and my talents lie entirely in directing artillery fires and basic soldiering, so and leadership, I suppose. But you know, I'm obviously not going to join the Russian military. Not that I would be eligible anyway. But given that that's where my skills, work experience, talent is, yeah, very difficult for me to learn a new language, go to a new country, and learn new skills. You know, very, very difficult. I could be an English teacher or something, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not sure I fancy that, frankly. But just because I'm not going doesn't mean you can't. I mean, do I predict like a big exodus out of Western Europe into Russia? No, not really. Not really, largely because of the language issue, as much as anything else. I think it's too big of a difference for a lot of people who would be interested in going to Russia are going to really struggle with that language barrier. And, you know, I guess that's why most people aren't going to take Putin up on this offer. But it's a fascinating offer nevertheless. Hey, look at this. Just another huge tower that marvelous Europeans have built. Right, anyway, I am full of food. I am quite tired. I'm just going to wander around, maybe buy some extortionate Belgian chocolate, and then retire somewhere nearby. Maybe drive to Calais tonight. I'm not sure. I haven't booked a ferry yet, so I've still got work to do. You know, before I go, the strangest thing just happened. I walked past an antique shop, and you know how smells can give you certain memories, bring certain memories back. It just immediately reminded me of my grandparents' house. And what's so bizarre is that my grandmother is Belgian. She's from Belgium. She was from Belgium. She's passed away, unfortunately. And she's from a little town like 10 kilometers away from here in Bruges. So, I don't know, pretty strange that I would get that sort of sense and that memory right here in Bruges. But look at these beautiful European streets. I love Europe, I really do. I think you can love Europe without loving the European Union or modern Europe or whatever, but Europe is just, I I mean, look, oh God, everything is just beautiful. I don't even know what that is, some kind of old castle, probably some kind of old prison or something. I'll show you it. I don't know what it is, but it's just another example of how everything here is beautiful. Lots of history, and it's beautiful. No idea, but gorgeous brickwork. You can only get views like that in Europe. That's crazy. I guess there's like a full band or orchestra playing just up there on the second floor in the window. It's very, very nice. Nice to listen to. If I lived nearby, I'd be pretty happy with that. Maybe not every day, but pretty happy.